All right, welcome. Good evening. Welcome to the Conservation Commission meeting, the June Conservation Commission. I'm going to read our preamble and then we'll start the meeting here. Good evening. As chairman of the Conservation Commission, I am declaring that an emergency exists, and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91A 2(3)(b). Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Thank you for your patience. We'll start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their name, also please state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting.
I'll go.
No, yeah.
So, we'll start with Sally. I think Sally's muted.
Sally Ward here. I am alone in this room, although there are other people in the house.
Dave.
Ditto. Alone in the room, other people in the house.
Carlos.
I'm alone in the room.
Bill.
I'm here and will be in and out. Okay.
Allison, I don't believe is here. Trevor.
Yep, Trevor Matera. I am alone in the room.
Okay, Lindsay.
Lindsay Way here, and I'm totally alone.
Ginny's not here. Dawn.
Don Clement, I'm alone, but Helen may wander through at some point in time.
Welcome, Nick Campion, one of our new members.
Hi there. Nick Campion, I'm here alone. Thank you for having me on the committee.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And Kristen Osterwood, also a new member. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. I'm here and I'm alone in the room.
I don't see Julie Gilman. Okay, and I'm Andrew Koff. I'm the chair. I'm alone in the room as well. And we have Kristen Murphy, our natural resource planner.
I am here and alone in the room.
And also on this call is Brendan Quigley, who we'll get to in a minute.
Question, Drew?
Yes.
So one of our alternates will be a voting member tonight. I'm not sure who that is.
Good point. Thank you, Sally. Trevor is now a full voting member. And additionally, I think Lindsay would be our next member since Ginny's not here. Are we in concurrence with that?
Okay, so Lindsay will be voting tonight.
If she's allowed to vote on gateway related projects.
Yeah.
Which she is. Okay, good. You got to check with Lindsay sometimes. She has conflicts of interest, but not on this one. That's good.
Great.
Okay, great. Is there any, I don't believe there are any public members here. I'll verify, nope, there's no public on the call. So unless someone attends later, we'll skip public comment. unless there's anything else. No. Okay. Actually, before we go on, I know I skipped over our new members last time, or our new member Nick last time, and I also felt like I kind of skipped over acknowledging Todd Piskovitz and his role as chair this last year and being on the commission for the last 5 years. So I just wanted to publicly thank Todd for his service to the town and this commission. And I think he did a really great job on the commission, really thoughtful, good comments, good discussion throughout his time here, and he will be missed. So I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly, that Todd is no longer on the commission. And I think we're excited to have some new members to help fill his shoes.
We'll miss him. Thank you for acknowledging his role.
Yeah. Nick, do you want to tell us just for a quick second something about yourself so we can all get up to speed with our new members here? Any interests or personal, recreational, conservation related?
Sure. So I work for the town of Danvers in the Parks and Rec department. I've been there for about 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for the city of Somersworth in their rec department. So got a lot of experience in the field, done a lot of partnering with conservation commissions and committee members. Danvers has a pretty robust planning department, which I work quite closely with. So yeah, it's just been an overall interest of mine. I think it fits pretty naturally with the Parks and Recreation field. And I'm also in a butter to the Rains Farm. I live a couple houses up, so we love hiking through the trails and getting the kids out. So that's just a general overview, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good mention that you're on the Stewardship Committee for Rains Farm.
Correct.
We already got him one leg tied down anyway.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's great. We've been trying to work more with Parks and Rec here, and I think there are a lot of connections, and it's great to utilize those more, probably with your help, to do more events. So that's great to have another good event organizer in our midst. So that's useful.
Happy to help in any way.
Great. And Kirsten O.
Hello, thanks for having me. As we briefly talked about, I'm also on the Town of Exeter Sustainability Advisory Committee. I just moved to Exeter in 2018 from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I learned how to say Pennsylvania because there's a Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, where I think all of 3 people live, but not that Pittsburgh, the other one. I'm originally from Maine, and I grew up hiking and camping all around New England. But yeah, we moved back to be closer to family. I have 3 kids that are in the tub upstairs right now, and I'm pregnant, and I will be absent from this meeting in August. So that's where I'm at. Yeah, we love Exeter, and Kristen M reached out about this because we'd been in touch, and right now I work at Unitil. I was in the engineering department, and then they have a new sustainability initiative or corporate commitment to sustainability. And so since March, I've been their sustainability analyst, and I've been doing a lot with the new building that's going in on Now Energy Way off of Commercial Drive, Industrial Drive, something like that. But I've been working, initially the building didn't have any sustainability goals related to it, but because my background is in green buildings and design, I was like, would you like to? And so now we're attempting 3 different third-party certifications. So we'll see if because the building was already designed, we were already far down the path, but everyone was really, really encouraging. And they're like, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so it's been wonderful to work there, and things are really moving along.
Wow, exciting to hear. Well, thank you. I'm excited to hear all this great background to add to our commission. I feel really lucky. We have a real diverse group of people here, from wetland scientists and biologists and others. So we have, I think, a great skill set, and I think both of you guys will be real assets to our commission moving forward. So thank you for joining. Next, we are going to do the election of Trevor as the vice chair. We tabled it last time, so I would move to nominate Trevor as vice chair of the commission.
Second.
Any discussion? You're going to be great at this, Trevor. I have confidence in you.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, so now...
Do we need to do a roll call vote?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead with that. Drew?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Sally says aye. Bill?
Yes. Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And Lindsay?
Aye.
Unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Excellent. Moving right along. Next, our main topic for this evening is the Gateway property project. We need to discuss the deed, stewardship fee, baseline, documentation associated with the Gateway at Exeter LLC mixed-use development on Epping Road. That's tax map 47, lots 6 and 7. We have Brendan Quigley here, who's we'll be discussing this with. I think we'll start. Kristen, would you be willing to provide a little summary like you did last time of what we need to do this evening?
Sure. So this is not the first time this project has been before you. You saw it late in the fall last year, and again, it was discussed last month. The focus of tonight, so at last month's meeting, we did look at the baseline document, the draft deed, a management plan. We talked a little bit about passive recreation and where the commission stood in terms of whether they were comfortable allowing passive recreation on the proposed mitigation land, and how to sort of maintain the integrity of the resources that are being protected through the mitigation process while still evaluating whether recreation is feasible and would not have a negative impact out there. Through the discussion at the last meeting, the commission felt they were supportive of a limited level of recreation occurring on that property, but really what that looked like and where it was located was something you felt until you go on site and walk the property, it was really difficult to make any sort of hard decisions. We had hosted a site, or the property owner did host a site walk on the property, but it was focused more on the development area. So shortly after the last Conservation Commission meeting, Carlos, Drew, Bill, and I walked, which were the members that opted to serve as almost like a review committee, met on the property. We walked the entirety of the boundary and the majority of the interior. And then from that, we were able to sit with the documents and really think, as we were walking, what sort of recreation uses could be appropriate and where, and evaluate whether we felt the affiliated deed restrictions and baseline documentation report and management plan contain the sufficient information to meet their intent and purposes. So we had a follow-up meeting where we provided comments to those documents. I consolidated those, and then we got together virtually and discussed those. So in your packet that I sent prior to this meeting, which Brendan did also receive, were some markup documents. That was it says that they're all my comments, but it really was a consolidation of the 3 Conservation Commission members, and then I did weigh in on some things relative to how things compare to other properties. So that's kind of a summary of where we're at. The goal tonight is to really discuss in more detail how you feel about passive recreation in terms of where it could be appropriate, what that might look like, and then to go through and hopefully feel supportive of the baseline documentation report should those edits that we offer be compatible with the property owner's needs, and discuss anything that we need to work out there. Another big hurdle that needs to be discussed today is the stewardship fee. So it was discussed early on that you were supportive of accepting this as conservation land, but you felt in order to be able to continue to maintain this property in perpetuity, you would need some sort of seed money to ensure that you were regularly able to monitor it on an annual basis. And then lastly, the conservation deed, refining those terms and conditions. And so Brendan and I have not had a chance to talk through those edits. So it might be a good opportunity to talk through any of those with Brendan now. But maybe it would be helpful to hear some of the perspectives, at least in terms of the recreation component, from the members that were there before we go further. So that would be Drew, Carlos.
Yeah, let's talk about the first one, passive recreation. There was a little bit of a mixed feeling on our last month's call about should we allow passive recreation to balance the need of the wildlife out there. Ultimately, it seemed like, based on our site walk and our discussion thereafter, that we do feel like there is room for at least one trail, probably only one trail out there. And the site actually lends itself to trails in the fact that there are these old skidder roads out there that already exist and already are fairly easy. Parts of the site that aren't wetlands are fairly easy to walk through because they are somewhat open still. So we seem to support passive recreation, although limited to an area where there's already been some impact. And that still needs to be defined more. But Bill or Carlos, do you want to follow up with that?
I can confer with pretty much everything you said. My feeling is that when I looked at the conveyance of land with conservation restrictions on it, which is a document that's in here, everything is about maintaining the area for preserving it, the area for wildlife, for conservation, natural resources, and that sort of thing. So I think we want to have minimum impact on the land. But I would at least agree to a one large trail, one long trail, let's say around the perimeter of the property or wherever it seems to go. We've got 10 vernal pools out there, so I don't see a whole lot of activity to push a lot of activity out there, because you want to protect those. At least I would.
Yeah, I think we talked about the idea that this would not be sort of a destination trail or a network of trails that interconnects into the Little River Conservation Area, which is the area further west. But that we needed to provide something for the residents there, because they would use the land whether or not we had a trail on it. People would go out into it. And if we could create a trail for predominantly local use by residents. That was the main idea. Not that other people would certainly be allowed to access the property. It's not like it's a private, it is a town-owned parcel that everyone would have access to. But if it wasn't if it was just a smaller trail, that would not lend itself to people traveling greater distances to it. Sort of like the 80 Epping Road has a trail that I don't think gets a lot of use by other folks.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what's been stated. Although I think we had gotten sort of more thinking of a single trail going in the middle, which really in terms of design is kind of the worst in terms of impact on the total area in terms of where people might be. But it turns out that that's where the old skidding road that's probably driest runs through that middle section. And I think we need to rethink where the main access would be for that if we put a trail in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I just had one comment I think came out in the packet when somewhere in your comments, Kristen, was that it would be helpful for us if a map existed of the existing skidder trails or skidder roads to have a map showing that. That might help guide us in terms of, we know where the vernal pools are and we know where the wetlands are, but it's when you get out there, there's more to the site than just the vernal pools and the wetlands. And so if there would be a map or plan showing those more open areas along the skidder paths, that would be helpful.
And so just as an overview for the other Conservation Commission members, we came in off of Continental Drive, or I guess, Kristen, you have a good point. I think it's whatever the Gourmet Gift Basket Road is called now, the offshoot from Continental Drive, Energy Way, I think you called it, and then drop down into the property. We follow the property boundary, kind of the northern edge, until we hit the Bloody Brook area. And then from there, we did some exploring of a lot of the trails and headed toward the northeastern corner of the property, which is the connection point between the proposed development and the conservation land, where the main logging road appeared to have gone in, and that it seemed like everyone who was in attendance felt like that would be a good connection point. But because it is basically a road, there was concern about long-term access and whether the public would continue to, use vehicles or, ATVs or snowmobiles or whatever it might be, taking advantage of that larger road. So we talked, it would be helpful to have a map of this up, but so we talked about
we don't have the ability to share screens.
Yeah, I think we do. Hang on. Let me just get it.
There should be a green button at the bottom of your window that says share screen.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Bigger.
There you go.
So this is, if you can see my hand, this is the proposed development. We came in off of Continental Drive and dropped down to the property. We walked out toward Bloody Brook and evaluated that wetland. We inspected the vernal pools as we passed them. And then the main logging road appears to come almost from here and up. It's not quite visible, at least not to me at the moment, but up into this area. And so when we were out there, we felt a loop really would be very challenging to install, or at least to make a decision about a loop at this point. But continuing to use sort of an out and back path might be a way to encourage use of the property by residents without without putting the resources at risk.
And so the access point, if we did the out and back, the access point would be right in there?
This area, yeah. And I mean, we need to talk, I think Brendan is on the call, right?
Yeah.
We need to talk with the developer about, and engineering to find out because there is some stormwater structures in that area as well. So we really need to kind of evaluate that. But in general terms, it felt, here's the logging road. In general terms, it did feel as though, and then it comes through here. It did feel as though making use of an existing impact might be a way to meet both intents.
And so the out and back would not then connect to Little River Conservation Area, correct?
Correct. The Bloody Brook is a pretty significant wetland complex in this portion. It does abut the Edmonds Conservation Easement, which is on the southern portion, but that also is quite wet. And then there is a very active beaver pond on the REDC property, which is this next westernmost property. So we do not have existing trails. If we were to connect with the existing trails, it would be kind of somewhere in, way down here. Or popping on to Continental Drive, walking down Continental and connecting that way. But there's guardrails here. This is not, you can see the contours here. It's not a level access point either. So it's challenging.
So I might have something to add to this particular discussion. In this corner, of course, you can't see my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
In exactly the area that Kristen was pointing to, right there. Yep. There is at least a preliminary concept of having an access in that location that would actually go right from the edge of the fill, the side slope, right onto uplands. So unlike the one that involved a bridge and a parking area, this would be basically a more less conspicuous spot that wouldn't involve any wetland impact, and it would bring you right down to where the logging road comes off of it's basically the log yarding area. That's where they had sort of brought all the stuff and had all their equipment. So that is a possibility. And I guess I'd also suggest that you certainly don't have to solve every issue with the routing the trail right now. That would be something I'd expect you to consider more carefully, and really go out there and take a look around, especially in the later in the season when things open up and you can see better.
Brendan, I didn't ask this before and didn't think of it on the walk either. When you were out there, have you seen any much activity as far as ATVs or bikes or anything out there? Didn't look like any. When we were walking, I didn't see any tracks. But
no, there's. I've never seen anything out there, even mountain bikes. If there was ATVs, I would probably know it, because they'd probably somehow be coming out onto our offices right down here.
Right.
That's why I made a point of noting in the baseline documentation report that even though there are these, relic trails, some of which are more obvious, a lot of which are kind of vague, None of them show any recent use. The only thing that I know for sure takes place out there is hunting. And while I see a lot of mountain bikes going out to the end of Continental Drive, I don't think they're going down into this property.
Yeah, so 1 year prior to the logging, somebody went in with an ATV. So I think there was some roadway, probably where the main logging track was put in, because that's the driest. And they went in, it may have been to pull out a deer or something. It went in pretty far into the existing Little River conservation area. And then I think they turned around and went back out. That's the only time I've seen anybody go in with a vehicle prior to, and that was prior to the logging.
Well, prior to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was I guess I'd say there's a period maybe before the logging and right after where it was a little bit more inviting. It's pretty tough going now. You know, some of the best access point, you know, for activity like that would actually probably be the road that goes along on the north side, which is and it sort of bends off and goes towards the highway, but that's off site. I mean, that you can drive a car down that road if you wanted to, but I don't think you can get back to the Little River or onto this property through that.
My point was just that we won't be fighting a sort of an established habit out there or grouping, so that'll help. Yeah.
And so just to kind of follow up, one issue that we talked about both on site and when we were discussing the documents was it's really important for the Conservation Commission to be involved in the location, the design and width and surface of the trail, but waiting to install something like that for when we have the volunteer labor to get that done is a bit of a challenge. And so there was worry that should the development go in and the Conservation Commission not really be poised and ready to throw a trail out there that's well designed, they felt there needed to be some sort of support provided by the property owner or developer in terms of either working together to install the trail or that the trail itself be installed at the developer's expense. Because, you know, as commission members can testify to, even installing just a small trail, even when it does follow some sort of existing path, there are challenges there, like gates and interpretive signage and trail bed that if it's not done right and done early, the public might tend to use the property in a different way. So, so in the memo, I did put together kind of a draft condition, but that is, you know, we can talk about whether that's something the property owner would be supportive of or how, you know, Brendan, I do recognize that you said not all of it has to be decided today, but there does need to be some sort of assurance on behalf of the commission that that they'll be involved, but not by not installing it right away won't see impact to that property.
Okay, yeah. Well, Tom is sort of on. I guess he's having some difficulty in joining in the discussion. I'm sort of texting with him. I'm going to
if he could call Bob, maybe, or no, I think who is Hillary on? I'm not sure who is on, but there is a phone number and an email that he could contact to participate. They can walk him through it.
Yeah, I don't see him up on the list here at all. So he might just be listening.
He's on the attendee list. He is. There's a Tom on the attendee list.
Right. He's not on the.
Because he's not a panelist. He's a public member.
Oh, I see.
So He may be here. I don't know if you can unmute, but Tom, if you're there, you can unmute.
Well, without offering anything up on the behalf of my client, without talking to him first, I will say that he's been very supportive of advancing some sort of public use of this property, whether it be one trail or several, or whatever it is. I think it's a fair assumption that that we could work something out as far as supporting the construction of this thing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I am a little concerned that Tom's not able to participate as a panelist. I know he was set up as a panelist, so part of me wonders if we should hold discussion and possibly talk on another agenda item until he's able to participate, unless, Brendan, he's given you either permission through text or in some way to speak for him. I mean, the terms
indicated,
of public.
Tom has indicated that he supports the trail, and that he's trying to get onto the discussion.
You should have gotten a separate link, but you know that. Well, why don't we backtrack for a second while we wait for this? We've sort of jumped ahead to the conclusion that we're okay with one trail.
Oh, he's on.
Hello?
There he is.
Hello?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, I'm sorry about this. I'm in South Carolina, and in the middle of a storm, trying to work through this. So my apologies, but I have been listening, and very much for trying to guide me through this. But I certainly support the trail, more so than you might think. But I do support the trail. I did hear Brendan's potential new access. And myself trying to find a way that could be less intrusive to the property, and hopefully it's one that we can work on. But certainly, I 100% support the trail, and am proud to be donating the 43 or so acres to the town of Exeter and the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you as well.
Okay, so it sounds like, I guess my point was, I think we need to take a step back and just to make sure there's no additional comments from anyone who, because I know sort of it's been this subcommittee talking. I don't know if there are any other concerns from the rest of the commission about allowing for this one trail for passive recreation walking. Have any objections to that?
Andrew, Don Clement here.
Don, go for it.
No, I have no objection. I think that was a very good report from the subcommittee. The idea of using the existing woods road or tote road as the one trail, I think is a very intriguing, I think is a very good idea. I haven't been out there in many, many years, but when I was out there, that particular tote road is rather flat, number one, and wide enough so it's good, easy access for people who have limited access. They don't have to be hiking up and down through, through over roots and rocks and so forth. So that makes it very attractive in that sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with one way in and one way out. It gives access for people who can wander off the trail if they feel so inclined. I mean, we have a similar situation up off of Kubi Road, where Kubi Road is one long old road that's unblemished in a sense. It's a one-way in, and you can turn around and come in one way out, much longer than the Woods Road here at this property. But I think it has a lot of merit in by trying to block it off so that we make sure that wheeled vehicles don't get in there. I think it has a lot of merit. So I like the idea of the one trail, because as we talked at the last meeting, we want to do a lot about preserving and protecting the natural resources in that property, but still provide some access. I think, based on your report, I think this accomplishes it very well.
Excellent. Thanks, Don. So we did talk about limiting biking. So biking would be excluded. We know that's a challenge when there's a sign that goes up that says no mountain biking, because often that can be easily disregarded. So we were talking about some gate or structure that would allow people to walk through, but not allow bikes to get through. They make these little things where you have to do a zigzag that would prevent bike access. It's not always the most visually appealing thing. I don't know if the commission has any thoughts on that component, because that would be something we need to talk with Brendan and Tom about, is in terms of this access point, what would that physical site look like and how would it be constructed? I don't think we need to decide it tonight necessarily, but maybe move forward with a concept.
So the concept now includes one trail in and out, passive recreation, and access at the point where we had talked about. Those are the three things I think we've agreed on. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So we need to do that. There's one other thing we need to talk about, which was the hunting. I don't know if we want to do that now. Or if there are more thoughts on the gate right now while I brought up the gate, and then we can move on to hunting.
There's a motion suggested on the agenda there that maybe if people agree, we could pass that and move on.
Okay.
I would make that motion if unless people have some ideas about correcting it, to change it.
Fine. Go for it, Bill.
Well, I guess I can send a memo to the planning board requesting the following condition of approval. Prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy, a trail open to foot traffic only would be installed as the applicant's expense, following review and approval by the Conservation Commission of location, length, width, and surface materials to prevent vehicular and bike access from the property to the mitigation parcel. The logging access road will be gated with a barrier open to pedestrians only. So that speaks to what you were talking about, some sort of mechanism. But that's the motion.
Bill? Discussion? Andrew?
Yes. Does anyone have any comments on that motion?
Yeah, Andrew, I do.
Yep.
I'd like to have the language of a wheel, the prohibition of wheeled vehicles. That covers a much broader spectrum than just saying no bikes or no vehicles, because I think what we want to do is we want to prohibit any wheeled vehicles in there, which would cover bicycles, ATVs, mini bikes. It's a broader spectrum. I'd like to see that added to the language, so that when somebody comes back and says, Well, it only said that I couldn't have a bike or a vehicle. I have a mini bike. That doesn't, you know, it's not the same. A lot of times when they've used a prohibition of vehicles, of vehicular, they've used the word wheel. So I'd like to see somehow that added to the motion. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think one other thing I would tack onto that would be motorized to address snowmobiles.
Right.
Good point.
Good point, because they haven't got wheels.
So we could modify it to say to prevent any wheeled and or motorized access from the property to the mitigation parcel.
Sounds good.
I don't know if we're getting so restrictive. I wonder if somebody with a wheelchair might want to access that. Somebody that lives in that apartment complex, because the beginning part of that trail is not too rough. But maybe that's getting too picky. Maybe that could be allowed anyway.
We did discuss in the subcommittee the concept of could this be handicap accessible? I don't know the answer. Could part of it be handicap accessible?
I think the impact from that is going to be so negligible, I wouldn't even bother with it.
That may be true.
Okay. So how do we want to keep the wheeled, excluding wheelchairs? Do we want to make an exception for that? Seems like we're getting a little nitpicky.
I guess it would say that at least we've considered that issue, and I think I thought we should be opening up some trail, not this one necessarily, but for handicapped access. But and I thought maybe that would happen down in McDonald property, but it's not going to, I guess. But at any rate, I just wouldn't want to prohibit it here.
Maybe we need a separate motion to have the developers investigate the feasibility of a handicap accessibility part of the trail, because that's a bigger question. I don't know, Brendan, if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's certainly something I could see that would be appropriate in certain areas. I guess backing up, I'm just wondering, are we talking about are these motions that we'd be applying to the deed itself or to the management plan? Because the deed tends to speak pretty broadly in terms of restrictions, and basically that nothing shall violate the conservation principles. And it speaks to the allowance for non-commercial pedestrian use, does not specifically get into wheeled vehicles versus, whether they be wheelchairs or mountain bikes. If anything, it would be non-motorized, non-commercial passive recreation. In this case, we could exclude mountain bikes specifically, but I guess it would be helpful to have a little bit more of an idea from the commission on where they expect these motions to be showing up in the preservation documents.
Yeah. This was sending a memo to the planning board, so it would be through the planning board's approval. Kristen?
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering if perhaps the motion be modified to have the applicant explore ways to prohibit vehicular access there, and then worry about the terms in the deed. I mean, we do have conservation deeds that prohibit mechanized, motorized, wheeled vehicles. But at this point, it might be, I'm not an engineer. I've not really looked at the details of the connection between the conservation land and the development in that area. And so it might be that the design alone would prohibit access outright. So perhaps the motion just be that, everything that we said, and then instead of talking about the gate, say that access, the developer be responsible for designing an access point that excludes motorized vehicles or wheeled vehicles.
That makes sense to me. So, is there any other thoughts on that? So Bill, do you want to modify your motion?
Yeah, I was trying to find out where does this go? Because, in which of the documents, I forget which one we had where it listed motorized vehicle. In fact, at that point it was saying biking, and we took that out. Which document was that?
That's in the deed.
In the deed.
We'll go over that in the deed.
Yeah, so at this point, it's really just to establish some sort of control so that the Conservation Commission, so that when the development gets approved, there's a condition of approval that establishes the connection between the Conservation Commission and trail design. And so that's what this is. So this would come through as a condition of approval in the development plan.
Right, because this gate we're talking about is likely not on our parcel, but on the development, and we need to connect this conservation parcel with the development plan. So that makes sense to me.
So the motion could read as it's written up to the last sentence, and then. Christian, your suggestion was?
I think without the last sentence, maybe it's fine, actually.
Just, and then have a separate motion on?
Well, we'll limit the bikes will be limited through the deed. So I think.
Well, yeah, I'd like to express to the. Shouldn't we suggest to express our wishes to the planning board, though, about they're going to get into recreation?
Well, it says foot traffic only, so that's pretty clear. A trail open to foot traffic only would be installed at the applicant's expense following review and approval.
Then I'll accept the motion up to and excluding the last sentence. I don't know who seconded it.
I did. The seconder accepts it too.
Okay. Do you accept that new change then?
Yes. So let's reread the motion now. Bill, can you reread it?
Yeah, send a memo to the planning board requesting the following condition of approval. Prior to the issuing a certificate of occupancy, a trail open to foot traffic only would be installed but at the applicant's expense following review and approval by the Conservation Commission of the location, length, and width and surface materials.
Good. Sounds good.
And details can be included in the memo regarding the connection, so that we can follow up with that.
Okay.
Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote again. Drew?
Aye.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally votes yes. Bill?
Yes.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, great. Why don't we talk next about the two documents drafted by Gov Environmental, the baseline documentation report, and these include our markups and comments. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to review them. So first, there's the baseline documentation report, and then the second one is the stewardship. It's not called the stewardship management plan. It's a management plan. These are similar documents, but they're also different. And we went through them and made some comments. They seemed not detailed enough in general. How do we want to go about this? Brendan, have you had a chance to review our comments? Maybe why don't...
So I'll just give an opening statement of sort on this. I did have a chance about halfway through today to start going through these. Unfortunately, I didn't have time till then. I did send Kristen a more or less complete implementation of those comments for the baseline documentation report. On balance, we'll just make all those changes. There's nothing in there that's that I object to. Most of the detail, as is fairly pointed out, was in other documents that we had submitted in connection with other parts of the project. So I've just incorporated, particularly with the natural resources, the natural features section, I've put in more information in there, replaced that whole section. There's some details in all these that will be left up to the very end, like the recording of the deed, that sort of thing. That won't be available until we're done. As Andrew pointed out, there's the baseline documentation report, which varies greatly from whoever depending on who I'm working with for the preservation. But there's relatively familiar with that. But the management plan is something that's apparently now required by the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that something of this type of document is available for property. And so that's why it's partially redundant. I wasn't able to get a clear answer on whether or not we could just use one. So I was kind of stuck with doing both. You could kind of envision making that really into just management and having the baseline documentation report separate. But if you're okay with having some redundancy there, it'll it'll be that way, and I'll basically make the same changes as far as the request for more detail in the management plan as I did in the baseline documentation. Also included some new figures, and I know I have at least one picture that I need to replace, and if there was any other comments on content, I'd like to get those worked out tonight, because I'll really need to get that stuff wrapped up. There might be some final edits that I can work with Kristen or the members of this subcommittee without having to, meet again. But I didn't see anything that was going to be a problem on any of those.
I have one question, Brendan. It refers to a right-of-way in this document. The property is accessible by a right-of-way from whatever it's located at the rear of the property. Is there a deeded right-of-way in this? And where does it go, or where does it come from?
Well, that was written when at the time there was a 6 parking spaces and trail access going right off the back.
Okay. Through
the wetland. And that was written just in anticipation of that. So that
there's nothing from the history of the property.
No.
Oh, that's the new right of way. Okay, that's our new trail access. Got it.
Okay.
So should the project be approved with the one we just discussed, this will essentially be back. That's what I'm saying. Some of this stuff, there is details here that are gonna basically depend on when and if and how the project is proved. So that would be one of them. And we'd fill in the details of that right away of that we just discussed. And of course, since it does directly abut the other conservation property, that was put in there too. Now, keep in mind too that for those you may not realize that the reason for this directions to the property is to inform your future conservation members who might not have the benefit of even knowing anything about this, can pull this out of the filing cabinet and know exactly where they can legally access the property. And that might be a little less clear on some properties. Here, in fact, we might have a dedicated trail access, and that's for monitoring purposes and such. So that access from by the same way, access, when we speak about the property may be accessed from Little River Conservation Area, it's not necessarily speaking to the public, and that doesn't mean there's any kind of access being established that way. It just means that for monitoring and various other purposes, the town of Exeter and its agents have the legal right to access the property at those locations.
Do we have other comments on these documents? I think we can kind of talk about them together as they're both so much overlap. I know Carlos brought up a good point that there's no invasive species mentioned in there. Do you want to talk about that, Carlos? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I'm actually very excited because I've been putting so many hours into removing invasives from some other properties. And in the walk we did, and that's even with a logging operation, found very little evidence of invasives. But I think for a baseline, it's very important that common invasives in surrounding habitats be noted that they're not present is equally as important as to noting there was a little bit of glossy buckthorn, multiflora rose. I saw no oriental bittersweet. Again, we didn't do a thorough walk of the property, but a lot of the perimeter and some of those edges, especially along roadways, are the most likely access for these invasives. And wetlands are also often impacted even more by some of these invasive species because of the condition of the soils. And so I was very excited to see there's very little evidence, especially of glossy buckthorn, which could potentially become the dominant understory species out there if it gets established.
Yep, I did actually add that almost exactly what you just said into the new section, that glossy buckthorn and multiflora rose in particular can be found on the site, but they're not really prevalent. They certainly would have been between 2014 and now was basically their chance. That the site's gotten a lot more mature without those species actually taking over. There is, and I don't know if you've seen this, but Kristen, if you go up to photo 16 on the list, there is a very small area of Phragmites right there. And that's about the whole thing. So that could be something that, it's been documented. So now, that should be something that it's looked at. I'm not sure that it developed on this property or actually came from. I haven't been down. This is really close to, where you approach Bloody Brook at the point of the property there. I don't know if there's Phragmites in there or not, but it might have come the other way. So that would be a good spot for some monitoring and possible some control.
Yeah, no, we missed that. That's good to know. There is in Little River. Little River, again, has a lot of glossy buckthorn, some Phragmites. And so that's why I was surprised to not see it in this property.
Yeah, no knotweed. I think some of the wetlands may have some stems of purple loosedrift, but it's turning so quickly back into forested wetland, so I don't think that's going to be really an issue either. So as far as invasives go, it's in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's invasives. Are there other comments on these documents that weren't captured in our comments previously? Or questions?
I think the comments are good. I went through the comments on the documents, and I think those changes are good, and I agree with all of those. And I'm glad to hear that Brendan's gone through and made quite a bit of those through the baseline, and that he has no objection with the content of what's been proposed, because I think it looks fine. And I know we'll probably discuss hunting as an activity at some point as well, because that's probably another one. And right, invasives, I'm glad we just covered too. So, I mean, it's looking good to me.
Yeah, why don't we wait? We'll wait to cover hunting and the deed, because that's where that's coming up.
Yeah, we're just dealing with baseline conditions here. And I guess I also had a question or two as far as the property owner, Town of Exeter. I had Kristen on there. Do you not want to have any contact listed at all? Or...
Yeah, I would just keep it the town in general. I would keep it the town in general and then not have an individual.
Or have a contact information, natural resource planner, to keep it more general.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that just kind of depends on what if DES, if that's a requirement of DES, that it not be, that a person be identified or a position be identified, then you can add my position, but it should, I guess. I would
just a comment.
Staying away from,
A comment on that, Trevor? I mean, Andrew? I've done this a lot when I was with the select board. Bill did too. People come and go, and positions can come and go. So it's always best to say, put it under the general umbrella of the town of Exeter. That covers it, because if you put it under an individual and an individual moves on for whatever reason, it's, it doesn't make sense. So keeping it as the town of Exeter is always the preferred language.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, I think we did a pretty good job going through this, and I mean, I feel, I don't know if we can approve it tonight because it's not a final document, but could we make a motion that we're comfortable having me sign off on the final document when after it's reviewed and drafted by the subcommittee, something like that?
That's good for me. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion?
Looks good to me.
Okay, let's take a vote. Kristen, does this make sense to you as a path to move forward? And Brandon, does this satisfy our needs?
That's great with me, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get the final document ready to go as soon as we, I guess, if we have to add the recording information, the wetland mitigation coordinator, because this lives in their files as well.
Yeah.
Because it's in the deed that this that you are acknowledging that the property is being transferred to you in this condition that this documentation report states. So I guess one more point of discussion, and I think I could make an attempt at mapping the skater trails out there. I don't know if that's something that we want in here either. In another 5 years, they're not going to be even there anymore. So I don't know if maybe that's just for more useful for trail planning and doesn't need to be in here.
I think it would be good to be in there. I mean, it's to document where the trails are now seems useful. At some point in the future, that could be useful.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it needs to be in this document, but it would seem like the natural place for it.
Okay, I'll try to add that in.
But it sounds like the motion that Bill made and was seconded is still valid from what I've heard from folks, and we can work out these details. These are details that aren't going to change our general consensus.
So we have a consensus here, and the motion is whatever the final edits are, Drew will approve those, correct?
Pending review from the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to do a roll call vote, Sally?
Okay, Drew?
Aye.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally, yes. Bill?
Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And Lindsay? That was an aye, yeah?
Yeah, Lindsay's muted.
I heard her say aye. I mean, I lip read.
Yep.
Great. Passed.
Okay. Okay, number 3, the stewardship fee. We've seemed to feel that it would be easiest and best and for everyone's interest to come up with a dollar amount today, a one-time payment that would cover any potential expenses. Given that there's added protection provided by DES, they have enforcement. They're able to enforce non-compliant behavior. There is lower legal risk on this property than, say, an easement that we just take over through a development directly. Does anyone have any way they would like to start this discussion or throw out a number?
I looked at the document that Kristen referenced. It's in her email, I think it was. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's a document that tells you how you could go about getting a stewardship fee. Much more towards, I think, looking at a property larger or more complicated, maybe even than ours. But they recommended too that you think of a one-time fee versus a annual fee. Although we already have one annual fee that's done, and their range was like for a yearly one would be from $400 to, I don't know what it was, $1,500. Taking the $400 one and saying just 25 years, that brings you to $10,000. If you said, well, ours isn't even as complicated as the lower end of what they were suggesting. Kristen, you may remember the actual document. I didn't write it down, but $200 times 50 would still be $10,000. And we hope to, of course, I probably won't be monitoring it at 50 years, but it also should include expenses. For example, if we have a kiosk put up, you think about, well, that may have to be repaired every 10, 15 years. Gates, that sort of thing. That all should be included too. So I don't really have a good idea about what we should come up with, since we're saying minimal usage here too. But I thought something in the $5,000 to $10,000 range might work. I don't know, just to throw a number out.
Yeah, in terms of expenses, I think we're planning on that this will not be used for the construction of any gate or access or the trail itself, because those will already be paid for. So this is sort of ongoing monitoring fees, correct? That's what we've come up with.
Yes, and maintenance, because once installed, there'll still be maintenance issues.
Right.
But yeah, I'm thinking mostly for monitoring. And again, there could be some like invasive removal expenses. I'm comfortable with that range, and I'd say maybe 8,000 would seem to narrow it down a bit more.
Do we have any precedents set here? Like, do we have any property we could compare this to that's similar in usage, and then say, like, extrapolate from that, like, okay, well, this is, annualized cost of that?
So I can give you 80 Epping Road as a comparison. It's a very different property. It's a conservation easement. It's a smaller parcel, and it abuts more directly the development. That property, they pay a stewardship fee of $1,500 annually.
I thought it was 1,000.
Oh, sorry.
I think it's 1,000.
You could be right. 1,000 annually. And so we really don't have a property similar to this that's owned outright by the Conservation Commission with DES support. But certainly, I think taking the monitoring, you pay $12 an hour or whatever it is, $15 an hour for interns to monitor your property, plus some maintenance costs. And, you're kind of in the range of what you're talking about. So it does make sense. And that's generally how you came to the fees on other parcels. But there's really nothing quite compatible to this.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. I mean, yeah, off the top of my head too, I was doing the same thing. It seemed that it was a very low risk property. Management was going to be on the lower end. And again, looking through this documentation, I came up with about the same number too. And I think between 8 and 10 was sort of where I was landing in the math as well.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with those numbers. Seem about what I was thinking as well.
I agree.
We open it up to the applicant.
Yes. Brendan or Tom, please feel free to comment at this time.
I think Tom's still listening as well. We had discussed something similar, but I guess in light of it looks like Tom will also be supporting the construction of the trail, which we had, our discussion included that as basically that would be part of this, what the stewardship fee could be used for. So
I don't think the trail construction it should be minimal in the construction. It should be, if anything, brushing certain things in. But it's not a lot. It shouldn't be a heavy lift, I don't think, from what we can tell. But maybe. I'm not, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, I mean, I might as well just throw back out there is that we had discussed something in the $5,000 range, given the really limited amount of monitoring that would be required. And there's not, with such little access, there's going to be less maintenance and less opportunity for problems, which is what this would most likely be used for. But I understand that things are expensive, so.
Why don't we just go with one of the first things that was thrown out was 10,000. You just threw out 5, called 7,500.
Sounds good to me. My hesitation with, the uncertainty, because it's a one-time thing, we don't know what's going to come down. So I'd hate to not have sufficient funds for whatever we need going into the future, since it's a one-time thing.
And I would agree. And one of the things, of course, that's not there yet is the development. I think the biggest pressure is going to come directly from residents right next to the property. And probably the most likely chance of issues is going to be either extending green areas out further over the years, moving something in, tossing out trash, those kinds of things. And that is going to require, I think, annual monitoring and connection with the people who will be living there to minimize it.
Now, won't some of that come from DES though? Also, the enforcement aspect.
No,
Am I missing DS's role in this?
Their role is as a backstop.
Yes.
Sort of a levy, a measure of last resort. Should there be any big violations that Exeter just decides to ignore,
right?
Or they decide to build a soccer field out there and it gets approved, then the state can come in and say, wait a minute, this was granted for mitigation purposes, so you can't do that. That's why they have this executory interest in the deed.
But we also have enforcement authority. So if there was something related to the deed, like they were dumping something, then we would have authority to issue, and we do that with our easements. So, and
it's also, it's not just you own the property, so you have property owner rights.
Right.
It's more about what you can't do and then what you can do. You can enforce all those things as if you do any other property the town owns.
So again, just throwing some numbers out there, because we're sort of like trying to guess at annualized management costs in perpetuity. So if you take something like Dave's suggestion, we're at $7,500, and you say, okay, let's just assume a return on that at 5%, annualized, you have $375 a year. Personally, I think that's in the right ballpark of where we're looking for management costs, assuming, again, low risk and probably just general maintenance throughout the year. So again, with Dave's suggestion, it was cutting it right down the middle of 7,500. That's something I would certainly support as well. Going to 5,000, again, just shooting for 5% annualized comes out to $250. I think that's probably getting towards the low end. So, I would support Dave's numbers, what I was coming down to.
Why don't you make a motion?
Well, yeah, I think we should make a motion, and this is our motion, right? We're not required to have them approve it at this moment.
Deal. So let's see, my motion to require a one-time stewardship fee of $7,500 to be paid to the applicant and deposited into the conservation fund for stewardship.
I second that.
We ready for a vote?
Kristen, is that right? Is this going to be a separate fund, or does it go into the conservation fund? Or do we not need to worry about that right now? You're muted.
Right, sorry. It does go into the conservation fund, but you're required annually to track those stewardship fees separately. So it would be maintained. It wouldn't be allowed to be used for something other than stewardship.
Okay. So, Brendan, yeah.
I know you guys are in the middle of a vote, but I'm having trouble in getting, communicating with Tom here. But I think he's wondering if this could be divided over 2 years, or if it has to be all paid at closing.
Is there a problem with that? Does anyone see a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think that would be fine, and any kind of difference would be negligible, so that would be fine.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'd agree.
Yep. I'm not sure if that was I'm not sure if his question was related to the larger amount initially thrown out or that lesser amount. So I just felt obligated to get it out there as an option.
Could we add the total of 7,500 to be with terms to be discussed at a later date or something like that?
Or how about spread over 2 years should the applicant desire, just so that there's not a requirement to come back to you?
Yes.
That sounds good.
I would amend my motion in that way.
Okay, let's vote.
Okay, Drew?
Aye.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally votes yes. Bill?
Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Done.
Excellent. Okay, we're doing well, guys. So in our next item here, we talked about the access. I don't think that needs to be reviewed. Let's go into the deed as our last major document to discuss here. One thing in the deed we might as well start talking about was hunting. We decided in our subcommittee that hunting would be an acceptable use of the property. Mostly, my point related to it was that the shape of the property being a little pizza wedge, the area around the pizza wedge is all open to hunting, and it would be impractical to prevent hunting within a pizza wedge. And that historically people have hunted there, and it made sense to include hunting out there based on the limited trails.
So my concern, which I voiced the last time we discussed this, was the proximity to the development, which is where people are going to be living. And I know that there's state regulations. I don't know exactly how that works. So would the property be marked for at the point at which no hunting would be allowed because it's too close to where people live? I'm not sure how that works, because there's nothing apparent about being close to the property other than being able to see it. Does my concern make sense?
Yeah, and we included, we talked about that and included in the revised deed. It's on page, I don't know if Kristen, do you want to share the deed? What page is that?
I missed that.
They aren't paginated, but it's in the permitted use section. It says hunting in season and in accordance with regulations is permitted. A hunting safety zone may be established to protect the residential uses. And Kristen wrote a comment that we should discuss this. I don't know if this is done elsewhere. Sally, I think it makes sense, intuitive. It's intuitive to me to say here's a no hunting zone. But my question was, is this something that is feasible?
I think you're talking about the stewardship plan or the management plan.
Oh, I'm on the management plan,
Yeah.
not the deed, sorry. But it's also in the deed. I thought it was.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think it is. I was just.
Oh, it isn't in the deed. Okay, I'm wrong. Sorry, too many documents.
I think I might be getting my towns mixed up, but I believe that the appropriate language might be something like "where permitted by other state law." It's no different than anywhere else someone goes hunting.
So my question would be just to be certain, what is the state law? I mean, what does the state say about hunting close to residential areas? What's the footage, proximity, or however you want to say it? Does anybody know that?
No.
Sally?
Go ahead.
Don Clement here. I don't have the hunting guidelines in front of me, but I think in the past they've been no discharge of firearm or hunting within 300 feet of a residence. And I think it used to be about 150 foot from a road. So 300 feet for, as you think about it, is the length of a football field. And in this part of the state, the only kind of hunting you can use is shotgun, which is pellets, which is a limited range. So 300 feet, I believe, is the minimum distance that a firearm can be discharged on public property.
Yep, you're right. You're right, Don. It's 300 feet. Yeah, discharge within outside of 300 feet.
Yeah, so it could be marked.
Well, if you look at the map, the border of the area, the conservation area, goes right up against the housing, so it's not anywhere near 300 feet away, I don't think. So yeah. Oh.
My understanding would be, so within a designated hunting area, to be within the law, you should not be firing your arm or firing if you're closer than 300 feet.
Yeah.
And the hunter's responsibility is to make sure that's the case, I think.
Right.
Talking with somebody an enforcement officer. I was surprised because I was telling him, well, that seemed very close to me. But then he was going through the same explanation that it's shotgun only, and shotgun has a very limited range, even though it makes a lot of noise. You're not likely to be hit. But with that given, this enforcement officer has also had many stories of having houses and animals hit by hunters. So I don't know if it would help to have it posted or not, because if you're a hunter following something, if that just makes it obvious, a little bit more obvious that you're getting within that range.
So if it's okay, I just want to make sure we're scoped here on the discussion. So it's not legal for anyone to be discharging within 300 feet of the buildings. So we shouldn't be discussing whether we want to mark that or not. I think is fair. But the conversation is outside of 300 feet whether hunting is allowed, because they can't hunt within 300 feet. So that. Yep. So you can sort of draw a mental line. You'll say, okay, this is 300 feet from the building. Outside of that, is hunting allowed outside of that? Because that's the only place where it is allowed currently anyway.
Yeah, so my concern was the proximity to the residences. And I don't object so long as the state requirement is met. I guess I would feel more comfortable if we could have some marking. But that's just my feeling.
Yeah, we could always, this will be our property to manage, and so we can do so at our own regard at a later date, as long as you're comfortable with there being some hunting on the property, and we can come into that kind of agreement.
Well, I think given the fact that there's hunting in the adjacent area, that it doesn't make sense to restrict it in this area. But I would like to keep the option on the table of some sort of posting as part of our management plan.
Okay, great. I think we can do that. And we'll work out the language. It's because it's in this other document that we already discussed, not the deed like I thought it was. Uh-huh. So we can work that out and make sure it's appropriate in there.
Great.
Okay. All right, so now we can talk about the deed. We can just go through it. Brendan, do you want to talk about any of our comments within the deed?
Let me just pull this up. Well, there's some comments that would, I'm not lighting up. Is everyone hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. There's some information that will have to be put in here. Actually, now that I say it, I'm not sure of the exact sequence because there's recording information that goes in here. And we won't know that until the subdivision plan is recorded. So there's some information that will have to be put in later, and hopefully we'll get some advice from our legal counsel on this.
In terms of how this is going to be sequenced in the deed versus before baseline, because both documents reference each other, so one has to come before the other.
Well, this references in the end references the baseline documentation report. I believe.
So I can help a little bit with that. Lots of times what you do is you just set the deed up with an underscore. And so the recording plan number and the book and page gets stamped on it, and the recorded plan number gets handwritten. And that's the document that gets recorded.
Okay. So I might have butchered this a little bit by taking out those underscores. This is sort of a standard template that was given by Lori to use for this purpose. It's from an easement. It's turned into a fee ownership, fee simple ownership. I'm just trying to think. I don't think there's anything in here. There's a comment about should long-eared bat be added to the property under the Conservation for Habitat and Rare, Threatened and Endangered Species. I don't see any problem with that. Yeah, I don't see any problem with any of this. There was a question about the discretionary consent, and to be honest, I didn't quite read or fully understand what the question or this section was referring to. So
that section's kind of confusing. It's sort of a wiggle room section where if we have an activity, an unforeseen circumstance or activity is deemed desirable by the grantee in NHDES, and at the grantee's sole discretion, if the activity is non-commercial and not for economic benefit, and does not impair the conservation values of the property and is consistent with the purposes blah, 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 of wildlife, all these other things, we can request for permission shall be in writing and shall describe the proposed activity to allow the grantee to make the judgments listed above.
So I think the confusion was coming in where this is addressing consent for an activity otherwise prohibited under Section 2.
Yeah.
And Section 2, here, let me pull it up. I'm just unsure what the intent is and what that threshold is. I assume that installing a trail or anything that meets the use limitations would not require DES review and approval, with the exception of forestry without a management plan. But without forestry, with the exception of forestry, which would require a management plan. But I'm just unclear what the intent of that was. So I had a hard time evaluating it.
Yeah, and it's not clear who we have to submit to DES. It's not quite clear what the process is to me either when I read this. So maybe we can get some clarification on this. It's sort of legalese that
Yeah, I didn't write this.
we're both just struggling with.
What I understood this to be for, admittedly without reading it that carefully, is for activities that are otherwise prohibited, but might otherwise be allowed because they don't contravene any of the conservation principles and there's a compelling reason to do it. There is a process whereby you can get permission to do it. But yeah, it is a little bit confusing.
I wonder if we just have this, if the Conservation Commission is supportive, as long as the Conservation Commission isn't required for review and approval of things that this already authorizes, maybe this is something, Brendan, you and I can work out and discuss after you have a conversation with DES to understand their intent, and work out language.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, this was, I started with the template. I made changes so that it, the obvious things fit with this property. Then it was reviewed by Tom's counsel, and then it was reviewed by Lori. I don't think it's been reviewed by the Attorney General, but it will be heading there next. So I'm hesitant to change anything. Tinkering with some of this stuff is maybe okay, but I guess my point is several people who actually write this stuff for a living have looked this over and not said anything about this particular portion.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know what the process was.
Yeah, I didn't read all this. I mean, as far as the content about the particulars of what Exeter may want, not so much to restrict, but what you might want allowed is what we should probably be most focused on here. For instance, the right to remove invasive species, the right to do forestry with the forest management plan. I can try to get some clarity on what this means, but it is definitely related to getting permission to do something that is otherwise not allowed, but there's good reasons. I can't think of an example, but
yeah, that makes sense to me, Brendan. My example was if they wanted to put a drinking water well on the property for some reason, that could be done accordingly. That's my view of the world is drinking water wells.
Actually, that's a very good example because you could see where if there was a water shortage and for some reason this was demonstrated as being the perfect spot for a public well, that seems like a pretty good reason to have minimal impacts to get to the point to install the well. I think that's actually probably exactly the kind of thing that it's provisioning for. I'll try to get a better description of what that section is for, whether it comes from Tom's attorney or Lori. When I ask Lori about this stuff, normally she does tell me that we should ask our own attorneys. So, and it might be the town as well who looks us over. So, that's an important step as well.
Yeah, so typically, as long as once the Conservation Commission is okay with the language of the deed, then we send it to Town Council and then on to the Select Board.
Okay, so is there any use limitations? I think Brendan's point about focusing on what we're restricting or allowing. So in the use limitations, do we want to go into nitty-gritty detail? I would say not, but I'm okay with how it reads. We've gone through this as a commission. Does anyone else have any comments? It's fairly standard language that I think we all can agree to. No subdivision, no structures, no advertising, no filling, no dumping.
Can we accept this or send a memo to the select board saying we recommend acceptance with that one detail that we worked out between you and Brendan, or between Tom and officially, I guess, something like that?
Yeah, I think that would be good. Or we could say pending the town's legal review.
Pending the town's legal review.
Good. All right, I'll make that motion. We review the proposal and recommend acceptance of the conservation easement proposed for a portion of tax map parcel 47-7-1 with pending review by town council or by council, anybody's council, everybody's council.
Any additional discussion? Tom or Brendan or commission members? I'll second the motion. Sally, do we want to take a vote?
Sure. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Drew?
Aye.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally votes yes. Bill?
Aye.
Carlos? Carlos, you're muted.
You're muted.
You're muted, Carlos. Put up your hand if you say yes. Good. Trevor?
Aye.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
Done.
Okay, excellent. All right, we're moving through this. Now that I think is the end of our list, unless Brendan or Kristen, do we have other outstanding items to discuss?
Okay on my end.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Tom, and everyone for getting through a lot. I know that was a little bit of we didn't talk about the phase one. I don't think there's really much in there other than what's the neat part of that is to look at the historical aerials. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the historical aerials, that is a neat section of the phase one. It goes back before 101, long before there was a 101. So you can take a look at that. Otherwise, I really don't think there's much to talk about. It's a somewhat clean site environmentally. in terms of contaminated site assessments.
So I will work with Kristen to get the final text of these things, of the management plan and the baseline documentation report worked out, and then at some point would get a full final copy with all the attachments and everything ready for signing.
Good. We'll review those and sign them, hopefully, and get them back to you. So yeah, we can send them to Kristen, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you very much.
And if people want to go out there, should we be in touch with you? We'll be in touch, obviously, about the access, but if other people want to do a site visit, maybe they can. I guess that invitation's still open.
I believe so. Tom's been pretty open having things open, and he's just told me that's fine. So the answer is yes. You can go out.
All right. I don't know why we would need to at this point, but okay. All right. I'll stop talking. Sorry. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Do we need a break? Does everyone need to stand up and do the hokey pokey or something? Can we keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. We're doing good, guys. Committee reports. Property management. Kristen, do you want to take this one? Stone Layton?
Well, that was just more to provide some correspondence that I had received by email. The Stone Layton property is down off of Powder. I always forget if it's Powder Mill Road or Juniper. I think Powder Mill Road. It's a open grassland field that at the time when it was acquired, there was, forgive the term, but a gentleman's agreement in place that the family could continue to hay the property and use the hay to feed their sheep. And so that's kind of how it's been going on for prior to when I started. I just kind of learned about it. I think one year when maybe a son or a daughter or someone was doing the work, they sent a letter in saying, hey, we plan to do this. And so that's kind of how it's been continuing on. There was a question posed by an abutter about, or a concern expressed, I should say, presented by an abutter that the haying hadn't happened in the past couple years, and they were concerned that the quality of the hay has gone down to the point where the property, the individuals may no longer wish to hay the field, and wondered if the Conservation Commission would bring in another entity to do that. I did respond basically saying that I reviewed the deed and responded basically saying that the deed does not obligate, some of our properties do, but that particular deed does not obligate the Conservation Commission to annually mow that field or have that field hayed. And as you know, mowing a field that size could come as a fair expense. So my thought was, we have had some challenging years, as you might remember from Rains Farm, in terms of just haying fields in general. Last year was incredibly wet until fairly late in the season. And so it may have just been that by the time the family got around to being ready to mow that field, the quality wasn't something they wanted to feed their sheep. So I just wanted to make sure you agreed with my interpretation of that. Basically that it sort of I don't know the best way to put it, but not an obligation to mow it. And maybe we could discuss it if that continues for a couple years, because it is good quality habitat to leave it as a grassland field, and you wouldn't want it to convert, say, to a woodland. But I don't know that we're at that stage now. I did drive by out there, and I didn't get the impression that there was a ton of, woody trees or shrubs growing up. So at this point, I kind of thought maybe I'd call the people who are haying just to make sure they were still interested, and then maybe make a decision after that. But I have not had a chance to do that. So I guess my point of sharing that with you was, one, it was intended for your eyes, and two, to make sure that I handled that in a way that you agree with.
Makes sense to me. I don't.
Don or Bill, do you guys have any insight to how that evolved?
I was going to ask this question, but the whole screen just disappeared here. I don't know where we are. Oh, okay. If I remember correctly, the property was purchased outright through the conservation bond back in sometime in the 2000s. Does the deed, and I haven't reviewed the deed or seen the deed since, is the deed legally binding that they have the ability to hay the field? Is that a legal part of the deed document?
No, them haying the field is not addressed at all. And early on, and now I can't even remember who had said this to me, but I was told that it was just sort of an agreement to allow them to continue to do so.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Not a legal. It's not written into any of the documents.
Okay. So two things. This came up about, again, several years back when Ginny Robb was trying to find an appropriate place in town to have community gardens. And the stone field did pop up as a potential because it had, it was a very large field, some fertile soil. You could have enough parking along there. And that's when I heard the term was, well, you can't do that because there's a gentleman's agreement that we can't use the field because the field can only be mowed or hayed by the stones or the heirs of the stones. My concern then, as my concern is now, is that the town owns the property. I didn't know that there was anything hard and fast in the deed that stated that legally. Again, but I wanted to be sure to be able to work with the Stones, who did sell the property to the town. But my concern also is if it does go unmowed or unhayed for a period of time, it does revert back to alders. It loses its field. It loses its field. And I think part of the mission or the charge of a conservation commission is the best management practices for a property. And I think we all practices for that property is to make sure it remains a field, because a field has an awful lot of good natural, tendencies and things that a field brings, to conservation. So I think I'd like to further have the deed looked at, number one, to what our the town's legal obligations are, or what we can do. And again, you're trying to reach out to the Stone latent heirs to find out what their continued use is. I mean, I hate to see this not to become a piece of property that the town owns, bought with town money, to just go by the wayside, go fallow. So I'd like to have this looked at, because it is a very, very prominent piece up on Powder Mill. It adds to the whole dimension of what makes parts of Powder Mill a very attractive natural road. So that's my 2 cents. Bill, you were probably involved back then too with me.
I don't remember too much about it, but I would echo your comments about, I was a selectman then, I think.
Oh, right, yes.
And wasn't involved in the nitty gritty, but I just assumed it was going to be a field and stay a field. It's a great place for bobolink and that sort of thing. So I'd like to do it for the same reason you mentioned. Would love to keep it that way somehow. So maybe we can look into it a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess in general, my thought was if it comes to a point where the Marstons are no longer interested in, or the Stone heirs are no longer interested in haying it, then that's something you can add to your annual budget request. And we're not at that stage yet. There's kind of a planning process that happens in order to ensure that. So I guess I'll continue to, I will follow up with the family to ensure that they are indeed still planning on doing that, and then hopefully have an answer before the budget season kicks off.
Good.
Yeah, I agree that we don't need to do anything until we get to the point where it's clear that it's not going to be hayed. And we want to keep it as a field, and then at that point we have to deal with it.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right, let's move on to Carlos.
Yeah, I'm not going to unmute. I lost my screen for a bit, so I wasn't able to unmute. So with invasive plant removal in Henderson, Swayze, since our last meeting, actually a lot has been done. Starting with Kristen went out for a morning and helped me begin a garlic mustard pool. Most of that was not Henderson Swayze. It was actually on the Rose Farm edge with Henderson Swayze, but it's starting to spill over into the town forest and into an area that's already has a created opening in it and lots of other invasive plants in it. So it'd be really nice to keep the garlic mustard from moving in there. And it turns out now I've discovered some more all along the next property, the Fort Rock. And so I removed garlic mustard near the large stone wall on that south side. That's all been done. And then Paul Friedrich came and joined me for a morning of pulling near where Landing 1 is, where some of the higher density on the north side of the gas line is. And we worked at a neat tool that you push into the soil, and then it has a series of prongs, and you twist it and it uproots. And that worked for a lot of the medium things that you couldn't quite pull by hand. And then I was implementing a pick, which I've acquired, which also got some of the larger things. And then
quite get that. Would you mind rephrasing?
No, it's sorry for that. And then I had a great day with Suzanne, who does the landscaping for various people in town, has a business of it. And she brought her whole crew. So there are 5 of them working one morning, and we worked also off Landing 1 and got through a fairly large section. There's a lot of poison ivy. They weren't quite prepared for the amount of poison ivy we found. And so we skipped over some spots, but we still made a lot of progress. So that's been great. And I've continued just on my own, plugging away at removing. And my focus has been to go from the interior back towards the Landing 1 in particular. So there's not much away from that now. So it's really concentrated down to there. And then, of course, on the other side of the gas line, of course, is heavily infested. And I really haven't done much in that.
amazing, Carlos. That's a tremendous amount of work you've done. So thank you. It really sounds productive the last few weeks.
Yeah, and then, well, I guess today's thing, so we did something out on Rains Farm, which will come up in a bit. I went in, I looked, also the little patch of woods along the stream. I discovered that there's knotweed in it, just starting. I knew it had some garlic mustard, and it's going right down the stream, and that really beautiful forest understory along that stream. So I pulled almost all of that, but there's a patch of knotweed. If somebody wants to join me to dig that, it's going to be a muddy, kind of messy thing. It's right in the middle of the stream, a little island. But I got everything but that, and that's going to have to be an annual thing to check that along that stream. But that was my latest excursion today.
Wow.
Carlos, get a hold of me and I'll come down some afternoon and give you a hand.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah, I'd love to give you a hand sometime too, Carlos.
Okay. And which Charlie will have the tool for the weed wrench that will help get some of the larger stumps as well.
Yeah, along that line, I did get an email today, Carlos, that the weed wrench is in. So I plan to come to town on Friday and could either drop it off for you or could meet you somewhere and exchange.
Okay, excellent. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos, again, and everyone. Do we want to talk about the Rains Field perimeter maintenance? Who's doing that one?
Do you want to talk about that, Kristen?
Sure. So first, two things. Kathy Norton had emailed asking for permission to hire David O'Hearn to mow along the stone wall, near the parking lot entrance to basically help improve visibility of that, the parking area, because it does, as you're driving on Newfields Road, it is kind of challenging to see that. And she was willing to spend her own money to fund him to do that. So I think I brought it up to Drew and Sally, and we didn't really see any concerns with that. It meets all of the commission's goals and intents. So she did, in fact, do that. And it would be, I think, really nice to send a thank you note, Sally. Maybe I could get you some of the note cards to send out for that $300 donation, because the town as a whole benefits from being able to see that parking lot well. Yeah. And then the second part of it, David O'Hearn, last year in 2019, you had approved hiring him to remove some of the brushy material and young trees around the field perimeter at Rains. And so last year you had approved $1,250. And so the concern there is that if left unmanaged, the field perimeter will get encroached upon and the field will get narrower and narrower. The majority of what is out there is autumn olive, so there's quite a bit of invasives anyway. So it's not like removing a ton of native brush. And so, unfortunately, he got very busy with his new business, which is great for him, but he wasn't able to get it done before the end of the budget cycle. And so we did have to return the money last year, but we do have potential this year. There's $1,000 in contract services, which was set up for work at Rains Farm. And then because we're modifying the mowing regime at the Morissette property, we have some cost savings there as well. So between the combination of the two of those, we should be able to fund, I think I put it in my memo, I can't remember how many hours.
You did put it, it was
19 hours, yeah.
Yeah, $65 an hour, 19 hours.
Yeah. So he had inquired if that's something that you would be supportive, still interested in having done, and he does have availability to do it.
So I just had a question about the money. I didn't see how the figures added up. So we have $1,000 from the mowing budget.
Yep.
So his total cost is $1,575. Does that include the work around the stone wall?
No, sorry. So you have 18. Yeah, Kathy raised this question as well. You have 1850, I think it is. I don't know that I can get to the budget printout quick enough to give you the exact dollars, but you have $1,800 and change allocated for mowing. And so you'll have a $275 cost savings by him mowing less. Yeah. And so, so the two of those combined, you won't go over your budget if you add the $1,000 contractor fund to your mowing proposal. When you consider mowing all of the fields and the Rains Farm perimeter. Does that make sense?
I think so, so long as the numbers add up. It just, the way it was presented, it didn't.
Yeah, I didn't word it very well. Sorry about that.
So I think that we want to do the work. If that would be my suggestion, that we do the work, and the price seems right. But maybe others want to.
Agree.
And just an associated question was actually out there today, and it is the Public Works had mowed from the parking lot up to the new area, but in the past. Are they still doing that?
No, actually, David
didn't walk it, but I think he must have gone. And it went to the trail entrance in the woods and kept going down towards the lower field. And that makes it much nicer for people walking it, which is getting a lot of use. But that would have been significant mowing, so I'm not sure where that came from. But if he's donating that, we should acknowledge it.
Agreed.
We need a motion to spend the money, Sally?
Yes. Are you making that motion?
Oh, if you make the motion, I'll second it.
I move that we spend the money as outlined by Kristen's memo.
I do second it. I think it's great.
And it is it's good that the property is getting the kind of attention that it is, and people are using it, and this just helps. So.
Okay.
Excellent.
You ready? Any other?
Let's vote.
Ready for a vote? True?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally, yes. Bill?
Yes.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Yes.
Lindsay? Done.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Are there other property management things? I guess I'll mention here that we did get out. I got out with Everett Evans, and we installed the Irving property sign, the new Irving property sign. I don't know if everyone saw that. If I sent, maybe I sent it to the whole commission or not. I forget. But that looks good to have that sign up and done. So thanks to him for the craftsmanship that went into that sign. Hopefully the sign will last longer than the post that it's on. So we'll have to replace the post at some point. Hopefully not in the next 5 years. But it's a big improvement out there between the mowing that Dave did last year and the new sign. I feel like it's a good place for people to go check out. If you haven't been out to the Irving property on the backside of the country club, we have access down the road and you can go check it out.
And I'll add that if anyone does get out there, if you could GPS the path, I would love to add that to the our Trail Finder.
I have that. I just didn't send it to you. I need to get it off my phone somehow and get it to you.
Great.
Drew, do we need to authorize some money for a
oh yeah, let's do that. We have some signs that were made so we have Everett sign, and then also additional signs made by
John Thornburg,
who's made all the signs for the town forest and Jolly Rand and many other new signs that you've seen out of Cedar. We were planning to get gift certificates from the Chamber of Commerce that are sort of Exeter area gift certificates in the neighborhood of $30 each. I think is that what we came up with?
Yep.
So I would make a motion that we approve up to $60 from the Chamber of Commerce as thank yous for our craftsmen sign makers for their free labor as a gesture of thanks to their service to the town.
I'd second it, obviously.
Any comments?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick vote. I vote yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally? Yes. Bill? Bill votes yes. Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor? And
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Okay, hopefully I didn't want to go past 9, but here we are at 9:20. Hopefully we can push through this quickly. Trails, we're on to some trails. There are some important things that came up related to that. Kristen, do you want to talk about that?
I did send this to you all, so you are all aware, but I thought it was worth mentioning for the public. There is a new document out, Trails for People and Wildlife, and it's a tool that maps basically more sensitive areas that installing a trail in those places could have greater impacts to wildlife than if you installed it in a different location. And just for the Conservation Commission's benefit, that's obviously helpful. One of the resources, one of their literature review, the report includes a literature review, and one of their conclusions was that the zone of influence for trails is about 400 feet in width, which was a little surprising to me. Granted, this is for multiple species, but and so I did send around to you guys just kind of as a visual what that looks like when you compare our conservation lands with the density of trails on many of them. You end up significantly influencing quite a bit of lands that are set aside for a variety of uses. So I thought that was pretty interesting to look at as a next step, because it is a GIS database. I'm going to start hopefully next week evaluating. I've tried to mess with it, and maybe Lindsay, you can help me, but evaluating, trying to identify which trails that we have out there are in those quote unquote red zones, those areas that could be having significant impacts for wildlife. So as we consider moving trails out from, away from a wet area, could we be sure we're placing them in areas that have less impact for wildlife? So it's kind of a neat database. You can view it on, I always confuse the Coastal Viewer and the other one, but I believe my email sent the link around for where you can look up these databases. And it's really interesting to take a look at in general. It's not surprising that they do follow a lot of waterways, but the link to the presentation I can send around if you didn't receive it. It's about I think like a 40-minute presentation for not a lot of time. It was a lot of information that was shared. So a great, valuable tool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing on that. That is neat. Do we want to talk about any new trails? Just segue into a discussion of new trails and trail closure from Bill and Dave.
I think we should talk about our trails, but maybe not tonight because of the the hour.
Yeah, maybe we can table that.
I would just say that Carlos and Kristen and I have opened up a new trail at Morset that starts as you come in from, if you come to the kiosk and just go off to the right, I'll have a sign up pretty soon, the ones John just made. And the trail goes back through the woods part, paralleling the field, and comes out at the top of the field, and then starts down the other side, also in the woods, and comes out close to the skateboard park. So there's sort of another way of getting some exercise out of the Morset.
The Oaklands and Henderson Swayze right now are kind of engaged in a game of whack-a-mole. We've shut down the past month 3 trails, I think, and there's 3 more that in the next couple of weeks will be shut down. I think with everything that's going on right now, a lot of people have too much time on their hands. And so what I'm attempting to do is deputize what I would call the core users of those trails, bikers, walkers, what have you, to start being eyes and ears to maybe nip these things in the bud before they get developed and we have to close them back down. But I spoke with Kristen today about getting some more signage to put up. And so hopefully over the next month, we can make some progress on doing that, and with an eye towards this mapping that Kristen came across, and starting to maybe eliminate some unnecessary trails, redundant trails, and that sort of thing.
Great.
Good. Maybe we can talk more detailed about these trails another time if we have space. Yeah. Okay, that's a good update, though. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of excellent trail use going on, and then some not so good things also happen. So I guess that's expected. And thanks for all your effort there. That's been great. Okay, challenge that Kristen came up with. You want to present on that? It's at the end of the packet. If you have that open on your computer, page 290 something.
Good Lord.
After you read the 300 and some odd pages.
So just briefly, I've been struggling with how to get people to disperse their use to a broader array of properties, and maybe encourage use of some of the lesser known parcels. And so I attempted a clickable PDF. I think I'm sharing it. And so a few people from the last meeting mentioned some properties that they thought we should include. It was a bit more work than I realized, because to link them to Trail Finder, I had to get everything into Trail Finder. But the concept here is basically we establish a trail challenge, and it's an idea that I stole. I think it was the Harris Center had just done this, but they set up a challenge where they put these however many number of properties. I chose 8 just because it seemed like there were quite a few we wanted to highlight. And the first person to send a photo at all 8 properties to me could then win this I Hike Exeter Trails sticker, which we don't give out to many people. And so what this is kind of a clickable flyer. So if somebody wants to go to the Morset property, they click on this, and hopefully this works for you guys. It pulls up the Morset property on Trail Finder. And the nice thing about the Trail Finder website is you can close certain sections of trails. People can comment and say the bridge is out and that sort of thing. So it has a general overview of the property, some photos of the site, and then you can pull up a trail map that has, some sites and trailheads and parking and things like that. So it's really a neat site that we have used, at least for our main trails. But this was kind of motivation to get me to to get everything on Trailfinder, number one, and to hopefully help spread people's use to less people on more property, so it's not as intense of a use as we're seeing right now. So I hope you guys think it's worth the effort.
It's great. I think it's great.
I think it's great too. I couldn't. Oh, the way I was looking at it, the links weren't working, but I just opened it another way, and now they are. So I guess it depends.
Not all of them are working because I don't quite, this is just a draft. I don't have, for example, Piscassic, the wildlife management area. I was still editing the trail data. And then you'll see the Irvine property. Oh, Irvine is here. Oh, here's the new sign, by the way. But the Irvine property, I need the trail data from you to get that up on
right.
Trailfinder. So it's poised and ready to go out once I get a few details tied up. But it hopefully will be a fun, enticing way to get people out on the trails.
I think that's great.
Great.
I think I noticed the Jolly Rand star is off. It's not in the right place. But that was my only other comment. But I think it's a great visual.
Oh, yeah.
And I think people would be excited. So you're going to post it to Facebook and
the website is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Great. Next, outreach, Rain's virtual birdwalk.
So before I turn it over to Carlos to talk about that, let me just point out that we're trying to keep Rains in the public eye with our events. We had to postpone the Skywatch because of the COVID, and that's going to be in October. And Carlos and Kristen had the idea of doing a virtual bird walk, so I'll turn it over to Carlos because he's done that, which I think is great. So do you want to talk about that some, Carlos?
Sure. And it wasn't just it wasn't really a bird walk. It ended up being introduction to Rain's Farms with some background information. So Kristen provided that, and then a bobolink highlight on the property. And it was excellent. The bobolinks were our background music the whole time. So there should be some video of them calling, displaying, and then information about bobolinks, information about other birds you can see on the property, and then a background on the property. So that is being worked on. Bob will work that up, edit it, and then it can be posted to the Facebook, and I don't know how else get used for people to see.
And I know it's being edited. Do we know when it will be posted?
No, we just recorded it this morning, so probably in a few weeks, I'd say. Or
Great.
What a cool! I'm glad we followed through with coming up with one of those.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Creative ideas coming out of all this.
Yeah.
Okay. The Exeter Tree Subcommittee.
So that's the major thing to report is to follow up that we did do the tree planting on May 21st. So the Chinese elm is there on Lincoln Street School by the playground. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, do take a look. It's a great event, and that's going to be that's considered our Arbor Day event for this year. And we do have the flag and the signs have arrived, and the flag and one of the signs is posted on the triangle at the intersection of Water Street and Summer Street as you're coming into town from 101, and it looks great. And the other
I saw it. It looks great. I happened to see it, and I said, "Oh, there! Hey,
yeah, what is that?"
That's cool.
And there's also one outside the town offices. So that was a great success. And I'll fill you in on what's next at our next meeting.
Great. Good work. So that's it moved amazingly quick. We don't have signs up all of a sudden, so that's official. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, the Sustainability Advisory Committee. Does anyone want to talk to that? I'm not sure.
So I just kind of sprung that. Kristen, I don't know if you were even aware that that was on there. But so Kristen is also on the Sustainability Advisory Committee. And one of the benefits to that is having this conversational connection that you can regularly get updates on. So Kristen, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to share about. I know a new fellow had started.
Yeah, there is actually, funnily, so Dave Sharples is working with the fellow to do a greenhouse gas inventory for the town of Exeter. But I'm also working with two UNH fellows, one intern, one fellow. And we're working on doing a greenhouse gas inventory for Unitil as well. So I've already communicated a little bit with the fellow for the town of Exeter because they're curious about getting their utility bills. But I'm not sure. Yeah, I didn't see that on there, so I didn't think of things to update for right now. But I'll make sure to have updates for the next meeting too.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exciting. Yeah, that would be a good to know more about that. So great. All right, let's approve the minutes. Does anyone have any comments?
I had a couple of corrections under the tree. I think it was because the night was late under the tree committee. So I'll just read what it should read.
Perfect.
This is towards the end of the minutes, and it starts reading, need to apply annually for the Tree City designation. So that needs to be an input. The Tree City was left out. And the next is the Lincoln Street School event, and this would be the addition, is the first in what will become an annual Arbor Day event. And then following that same sentence, to increase visibility, the tree committee information will be posted on the Conservation Commission website. Those are my additions.
Any others?
I'll move we accept the minutes with those corrections.
Second that. We can vote. I say aye.
Dave?
Yes.
Sally? Yes. Bill?
Yes.
Carlos?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Done.
Good minutes overall. I was pleased. I know we've had a new minute taker, but I think they're good.
Yeah, they're good.
Any other correspondence?
Nope.
Okay. Or other business? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
All right. I'm sorry to do this, but just
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to just mention the corridor webinar that both you and I participated in, and it also has a lot of great information that the town and especially Conservation Commission, I think, can make use of. It's a multi-state plan for connectivity between the coastal area and White Mountains. So that, I think maybe next meeting we can have something, and I can send some information to everybody so you have that, but we can comment on it then.
Nice.
And then I just wanted to just kind of plant a seed for you guys. So these virtual meetings are challenging and long, especially when we do have outside applicants. And so I'm wondering if during meetings, if we continue to meet this way, if during those meetings when we do have an outside applicant, it's worth just doing the committee reports in sort of a printed summary form, maybe put all of the details in my memo and just highlight bits and pieces of it, or I'm trying to find a way. I know that this is a difficult thing for you all to do. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to improve that. And I think there's value in sharing on the, Facebook and on the Exeter TV connection points some of the details of what you're doing. But I hope that, I don't know, just a thought. Maybe we can talk about that at the next meeting.
Yeah, it does get long. This one also went kind of long. We did better than last time, but I was hoping for 2 hours.
I think it was just because we had a lot of content. I mean, there was a lot of paperwork to go through with this one. So I think we'll see how it goes with the next one, and some of these others. They're just bound to be shorter. This was a pretty chunky one.
And we may at some point be able to meet in person again.
Yeah, that was my next point. Could we do like a hybrid thing where some people meet in person, but we're still broadcasting through Zoom?
At this point, the town, there is some early discussions in opening up the town offices to appointment only, but no change at this stage in terms of meetings. Because a lot of the meetings, obviously there's a public attendance requirement, and so it poses some challenges. So at this point, it's continue like this until further notice.
Okay. Well, I think we did a good job getting through a lot today. I'm definitely open to streamlining things, however people see fit, but I think we did a pretty good job running through, and I hope we didn't rush things. We know everything deserves its time to be discussed, but we kind of did a decent balance tonight, and hopefully next month we don't have any 3 applicants or whatever. So we'll see. I guess we'll be in touch about that and make sure we don't go past 9:40 next month. We'll keep stepping down here, hopefully, as we get better at this.
Great job. I thought they've actually gone very smoothly for the amount of and complexity of some of the things we've had to go through. So great job.
Yep, I agree.
All right, good. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. So wait, hold on. Next meeting is scheduled for July 14th. We have a submission deadline of July 3rd. And I will make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Okay, let's vote. I vote yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
I can go through the names. Everybody vote.
Yep.
Yes.
Done.
Excellent.
Great.
Well, hope everyone can get out and enjoy the trails and be safe and have fun out there.
Yeah, you
so
too.
We'll be in touch.
Hey, Nick, is Chris your brother?